Hello there. My name is Nex. I'm not like the others of my kind. And this is my story. Let's start with the first true home I ever knew. As most stories go, it was a dark and rainy night. I was just a child going from place to place. I started at the inn, but they didn't take well to ferals like myself who haven't gotten their civilized paperwork. I went from door to door looking for shelter, to no avail until I ended up at a much taller building. I couldn't read at the time, so I was a little scared, but my fingers and toes were starting to go numb, so I knocked. When the door opened, a human woman with red hair, much like a fox's coat, answered the door.
You don't need to knock. You can come in. We are
She paused and looked around, then down, and saw me shivering. With a heavy sigh, she said,
Come in and warm yourself, little goblin.
She was not very enthusiastic. As a matter of fact, she sounded extremely annoyed. As I walked by, I noticed her staring at my head. It must be my horn.
Go sit at the table and we will talk. You do talk, don't you?
I nodded.
Good.
We sat and stared at each other for a while. She was sizing me up. I could tell. Though, being shorter, my head barely reached over the table, even in the chair.
Now, this is a hotel. How will you be paying?
I pulled what I had from my pocket and put it on the table. It was a bunch of gears and cogs I'd found.
This is not money.
She exclaimed, annoyed. They're special. Like the way they move together when you connect them.
Still not money.
She paused.
But if you'd like, I will take it and you can sleep in the servant room I have for smaller folk like yourself. My name is Miss Terelia. Now, what's your name?
I don't have one. My kind usually calls me deformed.
Fine. What do you want to be called?
Next.
Good. Then I shall call you Nex. Does it have a meaning?
No, I just like the story.
You mean the story about the nexus? The point in which all worlds connect?
Yes, ma'am. At that point, I thought I saw a small smile on her face.
That's still a story.
She paused again.
Now, I'll show you to your room, and we have lots of work to do.
Lots of work? I was confused, thinking I'd only have enough for one night.
Why, yes. Trust me. Even though you just met me, I'm giving you a room with the rubbish you have paid me with, so you'll have to work here for a little while. Deal?
I nodded my head, overexcited. This was the start of the rest of my life. In the coming months, I worked with Miss Terelia, and she taught me so many things, and even worked with me to receive my civilized license. Those months turned into years, and through it all, Miss Terelia took care of me. She was basically my adopted mother. And that exterior of cold and annoyance quickly melted. I learned so much under her. She was a tinkerer, and created many magic items using warpstone shards that created things like torches without fire and other convenient items. We ended up making my birthday, since we didn't know mine. We decided to set it for the same day that I came to the hotel. On the first birthday, she handed me a gas mask that she made from the gears I had handed her on the first day we met. It was specially made to keep out all the hazardous fumes created while making Magitech items. She helped me make my clothes and everything I am. Though I don't think she liked being called Mom, so I stuck to Miss Terelia or Miss Tara. As the years passed, the hotel started to struggle. I could tell with the decreasing amount of guests and lack of needed upkeep. Miss Terelia loved this place, so I decided to ask the local businessman whose trade was in Warpstone. His name was Mr. Darenberg, and he was always looking for help mining the stone he sold. This is where I made the biggest mistake I've ever made, and still suffer from it to this day. Act 2. The Warp.
You've done this before, right?
Mr. Darenberg gestured to my single curved horn. No, I was born like this. We stood quiet for a moment until Mr. Darenberg broke the silence and brought me to what looked like a mirror. Except it wasn't a reflection of our world, but another. It was rimmed in brass and had several sockets inserted with red warpstone that glowed with power. It was like nothing I've ever seen before.
So you'll walk through, find some warpstone, and bring it back. It's that simple, and I'll pay you handsomely for each one.
He handed me a burlap sack that was almost as big as me. Then he shoved me through the mirror, and I was in a different world. It was red with orange clouds that were present until infinity. The land itself seemed angry and sore. Crackles of red arced lightning appeared every now and again, and it was a wasteland, one I was starting to have second thoughts about. I turned to ask Mr. Derenberg a bit more of what I should expect, but he gave me a smile and removed one of the warp stone crystals with a gloved hand, and the portal brought me here and winked out. I was alone. I wasn't sure how Mr. Derenberg would know when to open the portal back up, or give me hints on how to find this place when I came back, but I'm sure he knew best. Just to be sure, I marked the spot where the mirror was before disappearing. So I began to wander. And I wandered. And I wandered. Odd thing was that I wasn't feeling cold, tired, or hot. I just was. What kind of place is this? I continued to discover things I couldn't explain. Shadows of what looked to once be people and other creatures. Glimpses into places that could only be described as alien to me in all ways. Were these souls? And other worlds? I was not prepared for this place in the slightest, but I kept looking for the stone that would keep my family afloat. Demons lurked in this plane. They were not a fan of anyone, including each other. There seemed to be no danger in not sleeping with the energies here keeping me up, but that didn't keep me from wondering how much time had passed since there didn't seem to be a day or night cycle either. Eventually, I came across some folk that I knew were from my world. I had personally never seen them before, only knew they existed. They were a kind of rat folk, but I can't remember what they were called. I'd have to workshop my thoughts later to make sure I wasn't losing it or infringing on knowledge I shouldn't be. Excuse me. Both the figures looked over, with red eyes, and I think curiosity? It was hard to tell for me, but they didn't charge or attack. They just came closer very quickly with jerky movements that made me very uncomfortable.
What's this?
This goblin.
This no goblin. It has horn.
Only one horn.
One horn, yes. But what is?
It look like goblin with thing on face.
Why think on face goblin?
Yes, why thing on face?
I was taken aback by the seemingly friendliness of them and their conversation about me while I was standing right in front of them. It's a mask to prevent bad air from hurting me.
Bad air? What bad air?
You stupid dumb. Only rat can be here with no change. This goblin good smart. Know to be safe unlike others.
I butted in. Others?
Yes. Others like you come in and get eye crazy. We fight, smash, stab, cause it's scratch beats screech.
Yes. Others like you. Not nice, but you nice, we like.
You know speak for me.
You don't like nice green one?
Me like nice green one.
Then why matter notice of nice green one?
Cause you say not me. Me like to say.
Then say.
No, too late. You already said.
I butted in again. I need some help if you don't mind. And they both stopped and stared at me.
We like nice gob.
Yes. Like nice gob. How we help?
I need to find a warp stone deposit so that I can take it home with me.
We look for warpstone too. No good place. We share with nice nobody goblin.
We share. Yes. Follow.
And so I followed them to a place not so far away and was amazed to see a canyon filled with red crackling warpstone. The rat folks showed me how to traverse the landscape and even helped me fill my bag. They ate some of the stones as we worked, which was extremely dangerous to anyone who wasn't one of their kind. I noticed that when I touched the warpstone, though, it turned green and lost its crackling nature. One of the rat folk took one that I had touched recently and ate it.
Good taste. Me like this.
They said as their eyes turned green, and you could tell they really enjoyed it. We kept harvesting until my bag was full. Though it was heavy, I felt I could manage it and asked them how I could get back from where I came from. They looked at each other a moment and nodded.
You mark where you came, yes?
I nodded back. Yes. Yes.
Why no portal person keep open?
Always able to keep open.
I don't know. This is my first time here, I said, and they turned to each other.
You think it the goblin chucker?
Can't be, no. No, this goblin not feral. Not be goblin chucker. Must be a stupid dumb new guy.
Yes, stupid dumb new guy.
I inquired, but they wouldn't give me any more. We reached the spot where I came, and one stabbed the ground where I had put my mark, and the portal opened back up. Thanks for everything.
No thank, just no come back.
No, come back. Too dangerous for Goblin. Yes.
Be well, Goblin. Hope we help. Say what you need help saving.
Thanks, friends. Perhaps we'll meet again outside of this place. I waved and walked through the portal, and they pulled the stone out of the ground, and I could see them break the stone and munch on it together as the gateway closed. Walking into the shop of Mr. Derenberg, I called out his name, and didn't see the hammer that rushed to meet me, and I blacked out. Act 3. Regret and Horror. I started to wake bleary-eyed and groggy. Listening to the world around me, I could hear voices, but I couldn't make them out at first.
Why do you bring your burdens to me?
The voice sounded tired, but I vaguely recognized it as the town clergyman. I think his name was Father Northstar?
Because I'm the church's biggest donor.
That was Mr. Derenberg. But what were they talking about?
Fine. You keep the funds coming, and I'll take care of this problem. He will repent before I am done with him.
Remember not to kill him. His touch makes the warp stone more usable.
You worry about your business ventures, and I'll worry about the matters of the church.
And one more thing. This one stays here. He's too valuable to be sold off like the others.
Assuming the demons can be excised out of it.
I had no idea what they were talking about. But I was hurt, and I felt bruised all over. I groaned as I tried to stand and was met with something blocking me. I started to feel around and noticed it was on all sides. I was in a cage. What happened? Before I could get a word out, I was struck by a jolt. As I started to black out, I noticed a lightning rune attached to the top of this prison. I should have stayed home. As much as I don't want to remember this part of the story, it happened. And several bad decisions had led to this point. The one thought that repeats is, I should have stayed home. I didn't know the monster that Derenberg ended up being, and I didn't know enough about Northstar or cared enough about the church to interact with him. Besides, he turned me away the first night looking for shelter. I guess the gods are as fickle as their servants, at least in this case. What comes next isn't pretty. As a matter of fact, it's downright bad. Every day I was taken out of my prison, and while I was out, Northstar would do horrible things. I was beaten, whipped, buckets of cold water dumped on me, and so much more. One day I remember being thrown into the warp stone they had in the room. That was one of the worst fits of rage the so-called priest had. That also broke me. The pain of the sharp stones and the wood that gave way beneath me from the force of the throw was beyond painful. Northstar chucked me into my cage right after, causing a shock from the room. And even though it hurt, I didn't pass out. This time I stared back at him. He slammed the cage and screamed before storming off.
Abomination! Tomorrow we release the demons in you through your bleeding hearts!
I cried. Not only because I was going to die, or the pain, but because I let down the one who took me in. She must be worried sick. Or was I just as disposable? I knew it wasn't the truth, but the thought did cross my mind. I had been dealing with this torture for who knows how long. The days seemed to kinda just stretch on, and time slows down when you go from day to day, but the only hope of being removed from solitary confinement is beatings. Restraints were usually simple rope that tied my hands behind my back. They were weakened by the sharp stone I was thrown into, and even in my state I was able to break them. I pushed open the door to my cage. The door opened easily, as it wasn't fastened properly. Northstar's anger clouded his judgment, and he had forgotten to lock it. The one saving grace of all of this was that my belongings weren't far. I could see them, and put everything on I could, earrings and all. My next challenge was that I didn't know the layout of this place. I only knew I was in the basement, so I looked for stairs and found my way to the next floor. As such, I saw sunlight for the first time in a long time, and my skin was going from green to gray. It must be the lack of sunlight, I thought to myself. Something deep down told me otherwise. I discovered the exit, which was the main entrance doors, and I had to find myself behind the pulpit of the congregation room, where pews were lined up in at least 10 rows on each side of the main aisle. Then I saw them talking. I listened, and my blood started to boil.
No, Derenberg, I will not calm down. That creature you brought me is beyond redemption. It will die tomorrow.
He shouted with a little spittle coming from his words.
I fail to see how I'm the calm one in this situation. Let me get as much of the purified stone as I can. Give it another month. I've been stocking up and can place it in the adjacent room. It'll be enough to bring me to retirement, and you won't have to see another scum-sucking goblin again.
I will give you 1 week. If it doesn't die before then, I will be leaving it there to rot!
Give me at least 2 weeks.
No, that creature is an affront to all the gods, and I will not have it in my house any longer!
I need 2 weeks to purify and sell so I can buy out Teralia. I know that witch has been struggling, and I don't want to pass up the opportunity to crush her once and for all.
When he said Miss Terelia's name in such a way, let's just say the anger took over, and I made one of my final mistakes in my hometown. You take that back, I roared.
How did you get out?
You misunderstand. I was lecturing Father Northstar here on your release.
Don't give me that crap. I know everything. I've been listening to you. You.
You what? You weak little moss licker.
You are an affront to the gods and must be put down. All of your race pillaging and burning and other atrocities I dare not speak of. You are a mistake of the gods and should be eradicated or enslaved. There is no other recourse.
He truly believed he had the gods' power on his side. Derenberg chuckled.
It's a good thing your kind is only good in packs. Otherwise, you're weak. Now, be a good little moss licker and get back in your cage.
I had enough. They talked down to me. They talked down to Miss Terelia. I didn't have much. I was weak and tired, but I would screech and scream what I had to say before I went. Before I did, I put my mask up to my mouth and breathed in the last of what I thought would be freedom by the invention given to me by someone special. My vision went red, and I couldn't control my words any longer. I said a lot of harmful things. I kept going, too. Profanities, besmirchments. I called out Northstar on the fact that, he thinks he's above the gods, by saying that they've made mistakes, and calling Derenberg basically a poison to the community and everything he touches. It wasn't me. I've never felt like that before. The words flew out, but they didn't feel like my words. It's almost like I was possessed. I must have been imagining things as well, because a green fog started to roll across the floor. As I spoke the words, I realized both of the men in the aisle were choking on something. The green fog that had grown thicker as I spoke. Then the shocked realization came to me. I was making this gas. My words and malice had become poisonous fumes that were filling the church. I was the monster here. I was everything they said I was and worse. Tears ran down my face. I'm sorry, I whispered, horrified. I'm so sorry. At that time, I didn't know, but my apologies stopped the flow of the toxic gas. And I ran up to the men on the floor and kept apologizing over and over until the doors opened, and there was Miss Terelia, the woman who raised me and gave me a home when no one else would. She opened the door in shock and coughed a bit at the gas. And she looked up at me and said my name. I couldn't take it. I ran, and 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 I ran. I moved past her as fast as I could, and I kept going. To this day, I don't know why I ran, but I didn't stop for a very long time. Epilogue. A new home. The cart ride was bumpy. I'd been traveling for a while, and eventually I started to stir. The cart driver looked back at me and goes, "Good, you're finally awake. We're almost there." We took the stop outside of a town, and I walked by a building which looked abandoned. It was a little off the main road, but there was a dirt road going to it, and my curiosity got the better of me. I looked at it, and it was a big house. One story, but wide. I ended up getting to the town that it accompanied, and I went to the tavern called the Sleepy Scribe. In there, I talked to the barkeep about this particular building. Luckily for me, he owned the building. He said that he meant to do something with it, but he's never gotten around to it, and he offered to sell it to me cheap. I didn't have much. Go figure. But I gave him what I did have. It was a few gold pieces, but it was more than enough for him. He said, "Thank you. The property's yours. Have at it." So I did just that. I rebuilt the whole place. And, well, I needed to stay afloat somehow. I wasn't a good farmer or anything else, so I did what someone with my skill set would do. I started a Magitech shop. My only issue would be my supply, which I'll figure out later. I remember one more important creature in my life. During the renovations, I'd gone into the nearby woods to get kindling for a fire, in a really nice fireplace. Then I saw her. It was a fox. Not an ordinary one, but one like me. It was tainted by the plane that I had also been in, or at least touched by it. This fox had small mutations, such as some antlers, a second tail, and a third eye on its forehead. A moment passed between us, and it allowed me to pick it up. I found out eventually it was a her, and decided to name her Artemis. She is now a resident of my home and my best friend. We opened up the shop. I felt I couldn't get away from it any longer. I started to tinker just like Miss Terralia taught me. Making new things was something I had always enjoyed, and here I was doing it again. And thus, the Warpstone shop had opened up for business. One important note is that I ended up making my own warp portal. It turns out, breathing the air for the short time that I did had made me reliant on the energies of the plane, and that went for Artemis too. So we would take short walks together to gather the stone that we would use for tinkering. I also learned to make an opening somewhere else. So once every few weeks, we would leave a hefty amount of gold in a drawer of the front counter of the inn I once called home. I wasn't ready to say hello yet, but I would be one day. And I think she knew that too, as every time I came, she was sitting at the same table we had our first discussion and was sipping tea. And each time, I swear, she smiled. You could never tell with her. That is my story. I hope you enjoyed it. The shop is now open. Come on in.